Alright, welcome back to episode 3, which will probably be the final episode in the sort of how to get started with this game. The Confederate one I might end up making a version for, but really it's not... maybe I'll make it just for the heck of it. So the first battle that you fight is, of course, the first major battle of the Civil War, at least in the Eastern Theater, which is First Bull Run. So here, because we won the previous battle, you do get these, like, I guess, debuffs to the enemy army. Their army size, they say, is, this, and training and armory. Basically, this is how many sort of veteran units you're going to run across and how well they're going to be equipped. This for the Confederates, it's obviously going to be more trained rather than better equipped. For here, we see a victory and a draw are actually pretty decent. Victory will get you more money, and 1,300 guys is actually a decent amount. That's enough for at least a brigade to replenish. But overall, 17,000 men. The Battle of Bull Run here is really just to get you started, especially since you only have one corps that you are fighting with, and ultimately you don't even have enough men. But as was the case in the sort of supply mission battle, you get extra troops that the game gives you already, so you get all of these men to help you out without even having to do anything. So we know from our reconnaissance, our initial reconnaissance, that we at least have more guns and more soldiers, which is always good. You'll find with the Union that you will pretty much always outnumber the Confederacy, and that allows you to be a little bit more flexible and take a little bit more risk in terms of what you're doing. But if our reconnaissance skill was a little bit higher, we'd be able to tell how many corps, how many divisions, how many brigades, all that stuff. Eventually you could even look at the details, so you'd be able to tell what their equipment is, exactly how many men per thing, or per brigade, etc., etc. But really, when it comes to reconnaissance, again, reconnaissance up to 4 is pretty much my rule of thumb, just because I don't need to know more information than just at what point in time I'm going to get outnumbered, or when do I need to push, and so on and so forth. So the Battle of Bull Run is, of course, basically... we have a flanking attack along with this here river. I'm just going to skip through this. You can, when you play, you can take a look at it. But we have this divisionary attack first off. Now, as we learned in the very first battle, attacking across a bridge and into a fortified position is not a good idea. So this is only a diversionary attack, so you don't really have to put too much oomph into it. And in fact, because I know that there is a very strong element behind this, I'm not going to push across this bridge. I'm just going to sort of stand my men there and make it seem like they're doing something. As for the enemy disposition, because I've played this game and this battle several times, I know exactly pretty much where the enemy are. I've also played this as the Confederates, so I know generally that there is one unit here behind the fortifications. There's a cavalry unit, a skirmisher unit, there's a cannon right here, and then as we'll see later, I'll get some scouts, and there is a enemy brigade here as well. Wow, didn't notice that. Little crows or birds flying out. Alright, so at this point my cannons are getting shot at, and I really don't want to lose too many men, because if you lose 25 men, then you will lose a cannon, and already these guys aren't exactly full strength anyway. So you'll notice, I'm going to pause here, you'll notice that we can see the cannon and we can see the cavalry, but you still can't see the infantry I was talking about. But at this point I can kind of talk about the skirmisher mechanic. So infantry brigades have this ability right here where you can detach skirmishers. Detaching skirmishers gives you basically an increased view range. They have 850 spotting compared to 650 for a standard brigade. And so they're, used just like you would in any old Civil War battle. You send them out to skirmish and to kind of see what's what up in front, and then you'll come back later. You can do this for a delaying action, and in fact, this is probably useful in the Confederates' opening battle more so. But now that you've kind of seen this, I'm going to retach my skirmishers because I don't want them to kind of lose out and die out. Let's just keep going. The other thing about battles that's important to note is, at least with grand battles, there are typically multiple stages to it. So what you see right here, this scenario of trying to take these two hills, this is basically like the first phase of the battle. The overall objective, if we take a look, is to hold Henry Hill. And of course, we don't even see Henry Hill right now. Henry Hill is down here. And with Henry Hill, the idea will be that we have, when we get our troops up here, we're going to push this way, and then eventually push across this bridge, and ultimately come and take this hill. But again, there's not a rush to take the hill right now, because obviously it's not an objective, but this is phase one of the battle, right? So in each battle there are multiple phases, sometimes there's multiple days, and if you know your history, you kind of know the phases. Certainly, like here, in the Battle of Bull Run, a very prominent moment was when Stonewall Jackson's brigade showed up and acted like, their namesake, the Stonewall, hence they got there. But they're not on the field yet because they get deployed from the train station. So for now, we're just using, we're just kind of chilling and waiting for things to happen. Now you'll notice that these guys here are my given troops by the computer gods, so I can be a little bit more reckless with these troops, and I don't really care too much about them, but I'm not going to throw them against this unit because it's pointless right now. Really, the only useful thing I could be doing is what these guns are doing, which is shooting up the cannon, which is just going to make it easier when I do eventually push across this bridge. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit, and here we go. So now we have our scouts up top. These are melee cavalry, so melee cavalry look like this. You can take a look and they have the sword, right? And like I said, there is a enemy brigade here stopping anybody from immediately coming across and flanking this. And even if I were to be able to cross this with these scouts, melee cavalry are really only good for attacking artillery from the flanks and attacking and chasing routing units, and maybe taking on other cavalry. So rather than try and force my way across, I'm just going to send my scouts up to this other ford that I know is there, and doing that. Alright, so at last we get my units here, and these are our actual guys that we have to take care of, so we want to be a little bit more cautious and not push too hard with them, and not put these guys in too bad of a situation. Now at this point you could use skirmishers from your brigades and try and clear this forest, but because because I'm familiar with the battle, I know that the Confederates are actually they're currently probably deploying to this hill just as we're deploying to it, so it's basically a race, and we're going to end up in a tie. This is when this bar up here would be really useful, because what would happen is there's a blue or a red sort of power bar, and the more troops that you have, the more blue the line will be, and the more troops that they have on the field, the more red it will be. So, for example, if I were to have my reconnaissance skill, I believe that once these guys deploy, the blue is actually pretty much here, and that the only units on the Confederate side are all over here. But then, in a very quick fashion, the enemy will get a couple of brigades to come hold this hill themselves. So you can kind of like use this as a gauge to say, hey, when can I be more aggressive, especially if I outnumber the enemy, and when do I need to be more defensive or cautious, and all that. So I'm going to move my cavalry unit to this nice forest, and we get our final brigade from the 2nd Division of our corps, along with our last set of guns, which I believe are Napoleons that we just bought. And then we've got our supply. Again, with my supply wagons, I like to keep them off replenishing supplies until I can control exactly who is going to get supplies, because eventually these guns over here I might want to resupply, and the only resupply wagon I have is up here. I think I'm going to get another one from the AI units that come in, but for now nobody needs to be resupplied constantly. As I think we talked about last time, the gray bar here is the ammunition, so as long as they have a gray bar here, they're going to reload just fine, and so we don't need to push ourselves or to resupply them automatically. Alright, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move, I'm right-clicking and drawing a line here with my brigade, so you can kind of draw like a engagement line, and they will form as best as they can on that line that you draw. And then I'm going to send Stockton straight this way. And really the plan is going to be to just push hard on this hill. There's not much cover up here, so it's going to be an easy push. And especially if we use the canine tactics of surrounding and using your superior numbers, then you should be all right. Alright, at this point they give us 2 extra brigades in the form of Franklin and Wilcox here. So these guys are going to be more of your frontline troops. They're not as populous as my brigades, but of course I don't have to worry about losing all the men in them, because I'm not going to gain them back, or they're not really going to be there's no penalty. And okay, so I do get an extra supply wagon here, but I'm going to do the same thing and just move the supplies at the same to the same spot until I need to replenish my supplies. With Ellis here, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push him there. Again, you don't really want your skirmishers to be too far away from your main force. I think you can hear that somebody's charging at me, and there they are. So we've got Bartow and B coming at us. And we also get Howard. So we are getting some brigades, some extra brigades that we're going to use more aggressively. We also have Ricketts here on guns. And I think right now I'm just going to hold. I have an hour and 27 minutes before the next phase opens up. So I'm going to hold at the edge of this forest. And then my guns, I want to move up closer. Again, you always want to make sure that your guys are firing those canister shots and all that. They may lose a few more men to stray fire. However, ultimately they're going to do more damage, and that's really what you want against them. Alright, if you want to make this go faster, you can have your guys go along the road. I actually think what I'm going to do is use these guys in this direction. And use them to connect. And use them to connect with our elements over here. So the general overall strategy that I use with Bull Run is it's basically follow this loop of the Bull Run Creek. I believe this is the actual Bull Run here. The Confederates are trying to hold a hill, and they're trying to basically hold two sides of a pincer. So I'm just going to try and maintain a shape of a U and just either push it this way or enclose it in from the sides in order to surround the enemy troops and to defeat them. And again, because while capturing this hill would be nice to have the objective, there's no point in me pushing too hard right now. I can be a little bit more cautious. I'm going to push up my guns a little bit closer. And in fact, I'm going to send a cavalry unit to this little farm. For the sake of expediency, I'm going to speed up some time here. So you can see that you've got Pelham here, and they've just noticed my scouts, so I'm going to actually hit spacebar. They were concealed for a second there. And you'll notice that Hampton's Legion have showed up. Again, I would know if more men or enemies came at me. If I had my reconnaissance skill, I'd be able to tell they've added more troops. But for now, we're just going to have to deal with not seeing. And at this point, because Hampton's Legion is really like the only one, and they're already running away from my cannon because my cannon are able to put in effective fire, now I'm going to advance with everybody. And in case you didn't know, I am right-clicking and holding, and that will allow you to position whichever way you want your brigade to go or face. This works on all units. You can simply right-click quickly, but I tend to hold just because I like to be able to control the direction. And at this point, I'm sending Wilcox, Franklin, and Howard. I'm going to send them to be the top or the bottom of my U, depending on your personality, I guess. I have just received Sherman. I'm not entirely certain if this is William Tecumseh Sherman. I've always wondered this, but I've never looked it up. And Sherman is going to be our sort of final link here, along with the guns, with Ayres and Hunt. And really what we're waiting on is we're going to slowly connect here, and then we'll finally push across this bridge. At this point in the battle, the Union troops outnumber the Confederacy, and the Rebels are withdrawing to the hill. The rebels are withdrawing to. They're fighting a delaying action again. We outnumber them, as it says. And so now we have Henry Hill. This is our overall objective. How we win this battle is taking and securing this. So you do have to beware, because here comes Stonewall Jackson with his brigade of men. And the defenses are going to basically be in these forests and along this Bull Run Creek, hence the name. you always want to make sure to bring your guns up and keep pushing them up, because again, you want them to be close. At this point, I've noticed this artillery unit is a little bit exposed, so I'm going to bring my scouts across. When it comes to facing artillery, you're going to want to be careful, because they do, with the canister shot, they do cause a lot of damage. And I'm also going to bring Ellis over to shoot and guard on my flanks. My supplies, I'm going to move up to this spotting area, or the spotting hill, because I want to keep them close enough to where I can use them. And again, I'm just going to keep pushing. Howard, Wilcox, and Franklin, I want to keep them moving across. I've gotten Keys as well, Captain Keys, and it looks like the Clay Dragons have crossed over here. So it might be a good idea to have my scouts actually go deal with them. Having them in the rear isn't the worst thing in the world, but it is annoying if they are there. You can multi-click just like you can in Rome, so like control clicking. There we go, routing that unit. And again, when I'm advancing here, I'm trying to move from cover to cover. And so forest to forest is your best move, or forest to farm village, forest to fields. I'm going to pause this here. So Stuart's cavalry is going for our right. Yeah, whoop-de-doo. They're going to have to cross a bridge in order to do it, which is never a good idea. This Ohio unit has taken a lot of cannon fire, which sucks, but again, I don't care so much about them. And then we have Thomas Jackson's brigade. In this version of the game, or scenario, they just put a bunch of brigades and label them as regiments. So, but again, I outnumber them so much that it really doesn't matter to me that they're charging. But I want to move my men up to here. I'm going to pause again. If I can pin this unit into the water here, again, water is just like bridges in that you have very little cover, and your speed is also reduced a lot in water. Obviously, crossing a river in life is going to be hard, so that's really going to get you a lot of kills, and it's also going to cause the enemy to rout much more quickly, which again means that you can get rid of them on the battlefield. In fact, I'm going to keep Scales there, because he's pretty good. Alright, at this point, with my scouts coming over, we can kind of tell that this unit has been run off, or they've already decided to move, so we can push Sherman and Keyes. If you're worried about them getting caught, you can always run them. They do have 99 condition. And I'm going to also move my artillery across, because I want them close. And this scouts unit is really just going to be here to take care of the Clay Dragons. I can about face my riflemen. And you can double right click to issue a charge order, but you want to be careful because charges do cost supply, or not supply, condition. At this point we see that B is attempted to charge, and I'm losing men from Howard, but that's not the worst thing in the world, because again, Howard is not my unit. And I'm content with leaving my men on this side of the bank for now, because I'm not all in position yet to push. I'm going to use Sherman to kind of clean this hill of the enemy. I'm going to use them here. I've lost track. There they are. And I'm going to tell them to attack, and then I'm going to issue a charge order here. Numbers do mean stuff, so if you have more, typically you should be okay. I may lose that unit to routing, but ultimately I think I will win that engagement. And because the enemy is falling back, I'm going to take the opportunity to push up closer. I'm going to move my guns closer as well. As close as I can, really. And I really just want to link up my U. At this point, I'm going to send my supply over here in preparation to resupply my guns that are out this way. We can see that I've cleared the ridge now, so I'm going to push my units across the bridge that have been chilling there, and they're going to complete the sort of encirclement there. I'm going to move my guns closer, and you can kind of see that the clay dragons have beaten my scouts here. Not too terribly, it's kind of a even trade. But at this point, we've gotten rid of that artillery unit that just you just saw collapse. And with these guys, we can kind of wait on them and really just hold them in place. So with the Battle of Bull Run here, I mean, crossfire is never a good thing to take, and so really if you've got artillery firing in and you outnumber them, and of course I'm playing on easy, so but this works on any difficulty, this tactic. It's just the way the game works. The mechanics of morale are really important to keep in mind. So we do have an hour, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to push my men across. Since this bank is pretty clear, I want to shift my troops over as much as possible. And at this point, okay, Stuart has snuck across, probably down here. But I'm not too worried about cavalry on my flanks as much as I would be if there were more dangerous, like, brigades. I'm going to switch on my resupply here and send that going. My scouts have surrendered, which is not great, but again, I don't care about that unit because it's not one of my permanent units. I can start resupplying the artillery over here, but I want to be careful not to let that go for too long because artillery will suck your ammunition dry. What I can do here is, if I am too worried, I can run this 2nd Ohio to guard against Stuart and this Clay Dragons unit. And again, I'm just trying to complete my encirclement enough to where I'm pushing across the bank. So you can see we're putting in very effective fire, and we've just routed that regiment completely, so it's gone. It's really not a great position to defend this area. You can do it, you just have to make sure that your flanks are guarded. So the 2nd Ohio I'm going to keep there. I'm going to shift the 5th or 2nd New York and the 1st Ohio over. And these guys are just going to get free rein to shoot on Stuart as he kind of goes across this bridge and loses cover and takes that penalty. And I'm going to shift my units over and give them room. Your units won't fire, so in this case Walton, if there was a enemy brigade right here instead of Wilcox, he wouldn't be able to fire through. So you really want to make sure that you're maximizing the amount of rifles that are firing at any one point. So spacing out your units and making sure that they're all clear of each other is going to be helpful. Sometimes you just can't help it when you're assaulting certain positions, but that's for another time, possibly. Continuing to move my guns forward. I can take a look at their ammunition, and I can see that they're pretty well supplied already, so I'm going to undo my supply so I can, give supply to any units that may need it. I've made a mistake here in that I've forgotten about this artillery unit and Ellis, but eventually this unit will come back to me and I'll be able to tell them to actually go defeat that artillery unit. While in World of Tanks, attacking artillery is pretty easy and not dangerous, you do have to worry about this when you got infantry attacking you there. Now, you may get worried here. There's only 25 minutes left of this battle, but it is only midday. It's 11:18 in the morning. What I know is that the battle will continue with just one more shifting of the map to where the enemy does get further reinforcements, and ultimately that's the last stage of this battle. So I do want to get in position by then, but it's not too much of a hurry, so you don't have to freak out just yet. But I do want to get into a specific position here. These guns can now be pushed up further. The 2nd Ohio, I'm going to just keep them there. They are only 341 strong. The general rule of thumb, I don't like units getting down to even this number. In fact, when I do play, I think I tend to put units that are getting close to 700 men. I tend to put them on more of a reserve role if they're my guys, just because if you get too low, not only does your damage go down with having less men to shoot, but it's just you have a greater risk of completely losing a unit, and you don't necessarily want to lose a unit. When it comes to veterans, they'll completely lose the veteran status, and also just losing units in general, you want to maintain as many as you can. However, with the 2nd Ohio, of course, as we keep kind of hammering this home, these are free units that you should be using to your advantage. So all of these guys, Howard through the 2nd New York here, are free for me to use as I will, and to kind of take more of the brunt. You might notice that your guys are getting exhausted from all this marching through hill and dill. That is okay. It's not the end of the world. You may want to have them kind of hold back at some point, but when it comes to taking your objective, you're going to want to take that first before giving them a break. And ultimately, I know that really all I'm reaching to, like, my goal in terms of movement is really just to get them into an arc here, a nice inverted U on this line here, with the forest anchoring kind of my troops, and then the field being used as sort of, I guess, the last buffer zone. I'm going to send Ellis again to take out that artillery unit. I'm going to push my artillery up a little bit. I can even extend Stockton down to give myself some room. So you see Loomis is trying to find an angle to shoot here, and in fact Howard is completely cut off from firing. So I just want to space my guys out enough to where they can maximize their effectiveness. So I'm going to put my first Ohio there. I know that the enemy can cross at this point, but the enemy typically does not do these vast... the enemy AI does not do vast flanking maneuvers to kind of get around. Most of the game is just straight up facing each other on the edges of the field, and having it and duking it out like that. But there isn't, unless it's like a Chancellorsville or something, or a major attack, they're not going to send a lone brigade around to try and roll your flank. That is a tactic you can use, but isolated units aren't actually that effective, because if they get flanked themselves, which is easy to do if you have, say, one unit out in the middle of nowhere, there is a danger there to them routing and then them sort of taking a lot of casualties as a result of that. Again, I'm going to keep shifting these guys over just so they have space. And at this point, I'm going to move my guys up to the objective. And once they reach this point, I'm going to move my guns in position as well to support the infantry. And because I know my objective is just to secure Henry Hill, once I secure the hill and we see this Confederate counterattack, right, this is historically accurate, where Stonewall Jackson held. In this case, he didn't hold. And we're going to get the enemy counterattack in the form of, I can't remember who came up to help, Longstreet or something, I don't know. Now, this is one of those battles, though, that if you are of the more, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Sadistic sort, or you're just like to kind of push the game and its boundaries, you can actually, in this battle, completely annihilate and wipe the enemy army off the battlefield. And I'm going to pause here because I'm going to talk about what's happening right now, right here. You can destroy the entire enemy. As you can see, I'm in a nice... I've created a nice crossfire, so any unit that wants to assault directly at me is going to get shot at by several units. This is just standard military tactics, but it works especially well in this game. And what's happening here is that I have two units in the same spot, basically, and so they're going to basically shift until they are next to each other and they're not in the same position. And they're not going to be able to put effective fire in. So I'm going to shift Franklin over as I'm shifting this line over here. And Wilcox as well is going to come with me. And I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit hold. And hold just gives my guys a break, and it keeps them from shifting. And you can see how effective we're putting in this fire into the 2nd Virginia. Hampton's Legion, if you recall, was at 700 men, but it's now down to only 2. Oh, it was General Johnston. Okay, I thought it might have been. So here we can see an element of General Johnston, the Smith here, coming in. But not only do I have good artillery cover all around, I've created a kill zone right here. And so if the enemy wants to advance, they have to come into my kill zone, even if they've got, cock, bottom, and all that stuff. I don't know if that's coke or cock, but, internet. Again, I'm trying to adjust. If I wanted to, I could push these guys up to this forest line, but it's not going to be as effective as just kind of letting this happen. Again, the enemy is trying to counterattack and retake Henry Hill, but, I've got several cannon in the way and several brigades in the way, so we can really just If I wanted to, I probably could just hit fast forward, and we can watch the carnage unfurl, right? So Hampton's Legion is down to 100 men, and soon, once they drop below that, they already go. B and Smith are taking nice hits. We can see Stockton is calling out for ammo, so what I can do is I can send this unit of supplies down the line, and they will resupply on the move. And looks like Stewart has kind of gotten past us. So we're going to run our 2nd Ohio guys over. This is really annoying when the AI does this, but it is a good play to try and surprise the artillery. Hunt, I don't think, is my artillery, though, so I'm not too worried about them going down, but I am going to move these 2nd Ohio to a more defensive, a better defensive role. Again, if I want to, and I kind of want to, because I am a little bit of sadist, is pushing my arch around a little bit more, and I'm going to move Sherman up just to get any fire in. You can see the 1st Louisiana Tigers here. They were at 500 when they were over here, but they've taken a lot of casualties during the day. Veteran units will take a little bit longer to shatter completely, but you know, all units will shatter eventually. It's just, if you put enough bullets into them, they're going to be ineffective as a fighting force. You can see that this is my gun. It's taken two casualties, so that's, you know, not too terrible. So you can see the 27th Virginia here is under 100 guys, and so they're still there. If I were to come in with a flanking fire, then they would break immediately, but they still have morale left, so they'll still fight. And we can see the 4th South Carolina thinks they're hot stuff, and they're going to come into Sherman. But if you leave your guys off of this hold, they will be able to turn. And they will be able to support and fire into the enemy. And in fact, I might lose this flank here a little bit. They'll probably fall back. Now, Scales is my guy, so I kind of want to put the 2nd Ohio to defend against them. Shaver is my guy too, but he was, I believe, a green unit completely. So putting them in the line of fire isn't the greatest thing on earth, losing men, but they are pretty cheap, and this will give them experience. Looks like we've managed to hold this flank and rout the enemy. And so we'll just pull back and wait for Sherman to come back, because they are exposed. As you can see, this unit of the 1st Ohio ran away. Now, when it comes to supply, by the way, you don't have to worry about like spending $10,000 every match. They will replenish, like you already have paid for it. You can decrease the amount of supply to give you some extra money, I believe, but it's not like going to be a penalty to replenish. At least I don't think so. And again, I've got 2 hours. I'm still just holding this hill. If I want, I can try and push, and I can try and kill more of the men, the enemy, but that would cost me more manpower, and maybe I could, if you want to, try and push with my free units here this way to try and clear the hill, but there's not too much harm being done. In fact, the most harm is probably Stewart here. I'm going to send supplies down to resupply these guns because they're going through the ordnance pretty quickly. And at some point, the AI will might decide just to, instead of sending in charges after charge after charge, they may decide to stop attacking. The AI does realize eventually, especially in harder difficulties, when it can't win. And that's when you can kind of push more if you want to. The other thing we could do with the 2nd Ohio is detach skirmishers. But again, there's only 60 of them, and that might not be enough to stop what we're looking for. Or stop the Stewart unit here. So I'm just going to send Ellis out to shoot them as well. We can see that we're truly destroying units that come into our kill zone. In fact, Loomis is doing great, 822 kills to 134. That is a phenomenal return on your men. Walton, similar numbers. We could reattach these guys. Ultimately, getting kills gives your men experience. And getting experience for Loomis is going to be great because Loomis's Legion here, if I can get them up to 3 stars quickly, they're going to be a formidable force on the battlefield if you put them in a good position. Alright, our supplies are empty, and at this point what I tend to do with my supplies is I just send them off to go at the hill to get them out of the way. You can capture troops and you can capture supplies, actually. So like if Stewart were to kind of just chill out here and I forget about him, if my supplies were over here, they could be captured. And you can capture enemy supply wagons, and they will have supplies that you can use and distribute. And that will also help you if you capture supplies in the end game. You get some money from that and some extra just like rifles and stuff. And at last I've broken Stewart, thankfully, because he was stuck in a river. I was able to shoot him, which means that I can turn my focus completely over to them. So like I said, you know what? Because I don't want to necessarily wait around, I could just, again, wait and then fast forward, but if I'm wanting to push the matter with my free troops here, I'm going to send them in a general assault and keep my guys in reserve. We see Bristow is empty as well. Because Stewart is gone, I have no qualms about sending him that way. And you can see at this point that the enemy is in a sort of all-on retreat. They recognize that they can't attack with the men they have in the position that they have. If I were the AI, I would have attempted to roll one of my flanks, and probably I would have done it this way because it may be a little bit easier. And actually I might have done it this way because there's a little bit, it's easier to attack through a cornfield or a wheat field and then push away troops like that. But ultimately, you can kind of see that if the Union had good generals at the beginning of the war, the Battle of Bull Run might have ended very differently, in that we were able to easily surround the enemy and push them out across. But of course, this is non-historical and non-confusing, and you know, there's so many variables that go into a real-life battle. But yeah, at this point we can push our free guns forward. We can... Woods is actually not a free gun, so we can keep them kind of back. Ricketts is, though. And we can push our infantry forward and try and really shoot them when they're in this river here. I can even send Hug out. Now, there really is no benefit except for experience to like doing this sort of thing of trying to just completely rout the enemy, or if you're like want the satisfaction of completely destroying the army of the Potomac, I think, because we're the Army of Northern Virginia. Can't remember what the Confederates called their stupid army of this. Regardless, there's really no benefit here in the long run. Like, it's not like they're going to lose all these men, because the AI is designed in a way that even if you completely destroy the manpower of the Confederacy, there are still several battles that you will have to fight in the game. So the AI will replenish troops automatically, and basically there's no point in you destroying them, and it's not going to kind of have a butterfly effect later on in the campaign. That would be really nice and really cool, because you can use battles like Bull Run here to really destroy and damage the enemy. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. It does, however, work with you. So if you happen to get caught in a really bad position and lose a lot of men, then you will not be able to replenish as well. That's the kind of trade back. That's the design of this campaign. You can... while this unit is routing, you can, and you have the ability to capture whole brigades if you play your cards right. If this unit gets surrounded, or if I sent Howard in a bayonet charge in, if they are sufficiently broken and sufficiently, like, if they feel like this unit doesn't have any sort of hope of escape, so right now there's a lot of hope of escape, they just keep running this way, you can capture enemy units, and what will happen with enemy captures is you get, in a prisoner exchange, in a sense, you get men back. So if you find a unit, let's say there was an enemy brigade stuck here, you could send a unit in to charge, or just basically keep them there, and they will eventually surrender, and you might get an extra like 500 men in the campaign screen. Alright, so the enemy is kind of parked because you can't leave the battlefield per se. I think this withdraw button allows you to move out of the battlefield, but the AI doesn't do that. So really what we're doing here is just pouring in fire for no other reason than to see all the enemy rout. And there's another unit. At this point, the bar is probably around here, where blue and red, as units rout, you know, they basically don't show up anymore until the enemy is completely, like, depleted with manpower. And again, you can kind of see the tactics, or the sort of game mechanics at work here, right? So these guns are firing pretty close into me, so they're doing decent damage, but I am firing on them in a river, which gives them a cover penalty. As you can see, 50% cover in an open field versus 1% cover in a river. So rivers and streams are great places to shoot enemies. Enemies that are routing in rivers and streams are even better to shoot at. and ultimately getting them to completely shatter and run away like this. That's the goal. So we can even send Richard Ewell here on a running away course if we push our men up. And I'm going to just fast forward all this action. Because like I said, you can chase after these guys and I could keep pursuing them to the end of the earth, but ultimately my objective is to hold Henry Hill, and they have the nice check mark there saying that I hold Henry Hill. And so there's no point in me doing anything further with my men. They're all just resting and chilling and waiting for the battle to end. Now, of course, this is Bull Run, which is one of the easier battles. The enemy can press you up until this timer is 0, and if you get on like this cap, you can extend the timer a little bit. And other battles certainly are going to require the full time, and they are going to you're going to actually be on more of the defensive, and so you are probably going to want the timer to end, and you're not going to be able to do this whole situation here like I have. So at this point I can draw a line to reposition. You'll notice that all of my guys are all like not like in a line. It's not like Howard went over here because he was closest. So when redrawing these lines, be wary that your men will reorganize in a line that may not be exactly to your liking. And we got a minute left, and there we go. We can finish here, and we've done it. So ultimately, decent battle. We basically destroyed most of their army, and we did 4-1 in terms of casualties. We only lost 4 guns with 82 men in total. We did lose 112 men that were missing, and that, I believe, was my scouts. So if we look at just cavalry, you can see that the scouts were captured, so unfortunately we lost them. And if we had been captured, you can recapture your units if I had another cavalry unit to kind of like bump into them. And yes, you do get 2 career points in your battle reward for a grand battle. But I get a bonus Army Corps organization for this battle anyway, which puts them at 2. Or at least it should have. Oh, I get an extra corps. I think that's what the explanation was. I get an extra corps in my army organization rather than the 1 corps it was. So what I am going to do, I could bump my reconnaissance up. In fact, I am going to do that so I can kind of show in very quickly what I meant when I say reconnaissance at 4. And we can go to the battles map, and now we're on to Shiloh, right? So this is battle number 2, and Shiloh is really, well, it's the Battle of Shiloh. So if you know anything about that, you're going to know that the Union are going to get hit pretty hard off the bat. I do have 20,000 men to work with here, so the first thing I typically do is I replenish my men to a certain degree. Veterans may not always be able to like easily retrain them, but because they've only lost say like 55 men, it's super easy and cheap to get them up there. With the artillery, again, you're going to want to make sure that they get back to their full complement of men. With Stockton here, because they're not fully up, they need 4 experience points. I am just going to do rookies. With rookies, again, you lose experience points, but it's cheaper, and you really want to, as much as we'd all like to have a full army of veteran troops, eventually you may get that just through keeping your men alive. You'll get like units like Walton here, where you're just going to have a bunch of single-starred units, but you don't want to spend all of your money trying to get veteran troops all the way. Rookie troops actually are going to be what you're going to want to really work on, and especially with the Union, your rookie troops are great, and it's basically, you can think of this as free troops. We're going to re-veteran up our Napoleons. We're going to do that with up to 250 for our skirmishers. And now we can create our second corps here with William Brooks. Of course, each corps needs division commanders with Daryl Cochran. You'll notice that each corps has sort of a bonus thing. Depending, you could do training, which I kind of like because you get additional experience. Supply, our strategy here gives you extra ammunition, so that might be useful if you're going to, say, have a unit or a corps exposed and not having much in terms of supply. And then you can have some extra speed. So if you want like a Jackson's Horse Cavalry, for example, you can design a unit around that. So what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to, since it's early, use a trainer. And I've got a bunch of men, so I'm really just going to want to pump out as many brigades as possible of infantry. A good rule of thumb is you might want to have like 4 brigades and then 2 either artillery or cavalry or whatever. You're just not going to want to... you're going to want to make the most of your men and use as many as you can, especially early on, because ultimately this early battle, this early army building is all to deal with Shiloh, because what happens with Shiloh is the enemy will attack you, and having more men to defend is better than having less men. You can, if you play your cards right, get huge armies really early. In fact, over here with Reputation, you can get 4,000 extra men, or if you need money, which often is the case with the Confederacy, you can, well, Confederacy struggles with both of these, and oftentimes with the Confederacy I will use my Reputation to get more men. Then you can do that. We might think about it. I'm going to add a artillery brigade because I do have 10 6-pounders, so I'm going to make a brigade of 8. We'll make another division here. And I think what we'll do is we'll keep doing infantry. I can repurpose all these farmers if I want to, but again, they're shittier at reloading, shittier with efficiency, and only better at melee. So what's probably a better idea is I just repurpose all these guns that I captured and sell them all there. Hunters are decent. In fact, let's do that once I do this. So you can see that I'm buying all these rifles now, so creating these brigades is going to be more expensive. If I want to create a sharpshooter unit, which I typically like to create sharpshooter units, hunters are your basic sniper rifle. They are, I think, kind of like your sort of basic sniper, but eventually these sharps or these rifles are going to be more to your liking, and in fact I could create a unit of 100 snipers here with telescopic sights. You can see they have decent reloading, decent efficiency, and they could be an effective flank guarding force or sort of just like a harassing unit on the side. I would have to bring this unit down to 100. And I really don't like putting units down to 100 because that would really, they wouldn't be, they would have a really glass draw, or they'd have a low ceiling of damage. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create another cavalry brigade, and this time I'm going to try and get a Sharps model of some sort. There we go. Sharps model 1855 is a pretty good standard cavalry unit. And I'm going to push these guys up to 300. just because I have the extra men and all that. And we will do, yeah, that. So, this is a pretty good disposition, but you can tell that my second corps has many more soldiers in terms of infantry, even though these guys are a little bit more experienced. But this is when your army organization is really going to help you, because you're going to want more men. And so our next sort of step in our army organization will give us 3 divisions per corps, and then as we go up, we'll get a larger and larger force. So certainly for our next battle here, for Crossroads or for the river crossing here, we're going to want a victory, first of all, always want a victory, but then we're going to probably want to put in a point into our army organization. So the last thing I'm going to show you is I'm just going to quickly hop into this, and I'm going to show you what I meant by that reconnaissance thing. You can already see that with the reconnaissance skill of 4, I can see the total units that are going to be involved, so there's going to be 16 brigades, and I'm at most going to only be able to deploy 8. 8 out of 12. So we can use my second corps because I have 9,000 infantry, which means that I will outnumber them already, which is good. And this one is a little bit more annoying. This is your deployment screen, whatever. This one's annoying because of the assault direction. Attacking up a hill, not a good idea. Attacking when you've got a little creek here, again, you're going to get shot at a bunch, so you're going to have to use a lot of maneuvering to get around. Typically what I do is I hold and then I advance this way and try and move and sweep the enemy off this. But up at the top, you can see this gray bar that we had before is now red, and you can see that the exact amount of troops that I have and guns, and the same for the Confederates. So on the battlefield right now, because I haven't deployed, it says, okay, look, the Confederates are in complete control. If they were to get a sudden reinforcement boost or something, then this bar would adjust. But if I hit start battle, you'll see roughly we're even, if a little bit more to the right. And this will adjust as battle happens, as casualties are taken, and ultimately it's great because, like I said, you can use it to say, hey, when can I push? When do I know that I'm outnumbering my enemy? And this would be a phenomenal thing if you are George McClellan, but unfortunately he didn't have this feature. So with that, I'm going to end this battle and sort of quit out, and that should be all you need to know for the very basics. Everything else you should be able to figure out on your own as you play, but that should be a very basic guide to getting started with the Union and getting started with this game as a whole. So thanks for watching and take care.